This is the second panel. This one will feel a little different than the first one. We're going to get a little bit more into what being the PJ is about, what it feels like in the different departments to, be there, and ask them their views, these two PJs, these two wonderful PJs, on some very controversial issues. I mean, not very, very controversial, but a little bit controversial. We're going to ask them. All right, so the first thing I want to ask you is, what's it like to be the PJ? Is it more like herding cattle? Or is it just, are you one among equals? What is it? Tell us your innermost feelings about what it's like to be the...
He's deferring to me. This may be the first time ever. So, yeah.
Seniority.
So, it's a little of both. It depends on what you're doing. And so in the case law, it's just one among equals. In the review and when we're sitting on a panel. In the conference room, in the organization, all of the headaches that come along from time to time, those
You mean you have headaches in the Appellate Division?
Those get to be mine.
Oh,
They're happy to defer on those things. So first among equals in, or really just working with the crew in regard to the cases. But the management part is really the role of the PJ.
Okay. Hector, you have no headaches in the second department, do you?
No, it's a dream. It's an absolute dream, Chief. I don't know what you think. No, all kidding aside. No, I think what PJ Garry said is absolutely accurate. Same for me. The reality is when I'm sitting on a panel, I'm one of four, and there's no, me being the PJ doesn't really have much effect there. But certainly when we're handling administrative matters and how we're going to do things, what the protocols are, I think that's within my domain, and that's how I basically handle it. I would imagine same for you, right, Beth, in that way?
Yeah, that's what I was saying, yeah.
Well, let's talk about the administrative matters a little bit. What do your departments feel like? Are the judges in the Appellate Division on a daily basis? Are they in the home chambers? How do you deal with them? Electronically, over the phone? Are they in person? How does it work in the third and the second department?
Probably more similar than I was about to say, because you're spread all over from Dutchess County down. We're spread over a wide geography. So we gather, like the Court of Appeals, and like the Fourth Department, for set terms. So when we're in term, we are all together. Otherwise, we're dispersed wherever our home chambers are.
And how do you reach them, Beth, when you want to reach them?
So we communicate in any way we like, and in every way we like, and that is measured by what it is. If you're going to argue about something, it's always better to do it by telephone. If you're going to discuss something that's really complex, the easiest way to do that is in writing, because then you can see it. So you would call someone and say, I think not, I'm disagreeing with this, let me show you what I'm thinking, and then you send it by email. And so that's sort of, so it's collaborative.
Yeah, very similar. We have three judges who sit in Brooklyn at 45 Monroe. Everyone else has chambers locally in their respective counties. And as far as how we work, similar to, I think, what Beth just said, if we're talking about a legal issue, right, we want to show that we'll do that in writing with one another. But I try to save the most sensitive communications. I like to do that through a phone call. People can hear your voice. They understand what you're trying to get across. There's no misinterpretation typically when there's a phone call in place. That's how I typically work things in my court.
What do your different departments feel like? Hector, is yours a suburban feeling to the... I know you have urban, suburban, rural.
Right.
And Beth, you have urban, rural, some suburban. What's the feeling in the department? What's the character of each of your departments?
Yeah, I'll take that one. It's very diverse, right, Chief? I mean, I think the second department is much like the state, right? And as you just stated, from urban to rural. Right. Having said all that, I don't know what kind of, we all have, what's interesting about the courts, the judges come from different legal cultures, right? Because Queens is different than Kings.
Oh, I get it.
And Suffolk is different. Suffolk is different than Westchester, and we all have different accents, right? I'm from Long Island, but all kidding aside, we have different cultures we come from, we come together and we meld that together to try to have a second department culture. And that's one of collaboration, working with one another. It really does require the judges to take, to really take their egos and put them aside as best as possible. I would imagine it's the same in all 4 departments, but I can tell you certainly my court, it's really a collaborative culture, one where we're just trying to get it right, doing our best to do so.
And Beth?
I dare say that I'm more rural than my friend Hector.
I know you are.
But arguably not more than my friend Jerry out there. So, so diversity in all things is a really positive thing. And that is, we have several judges who are right in Albany.
Does Albany define the character of the court? Because you get a lot of government cases and that kind of thing.
Oh, well, in that respect, certainly. You know, that is a really big and important part of our docket, the administrative law and the challenges to all the state government agency things. And those are often very weighty cases in their way. So that's something we're proud of. We like working on that. You know, the AG's office is in our court all the time. They do remarkably strong argument. You know, it's that's a fun part of our caseload for sure.
So let me ask you something. It's a little bit controversial. There's so much talk today about the political polarization of the courts, that the courts have become part of, like the executive or the legislative. Do either of you feel that? Is that in your court? Is there a Republican and Democratic, a liberal or conservative divide in your courts? Do you feel that polarization, or doesn't it matter whether you're an R or a D or a liberal or a conservative? How does it work, and what does it feel like in that regard?
Our court traditionally, in terms of our actual enrollment, our court used to be almost evenly split, but it is no more.
Right.
We have had a succession of Democratic governors, and so now my court is almost essentially all of that political persuasion, but or party membership, I should say. But that said, you know, the work we do just is not political work. Even the political cases we hear, for the most part, are really not political cases. They're law. And so that's a real, a very sad misunderstanding in our current culture. And part of what, I don't mean to go on too long, Chief, but it's part of what the civics education, I think, is really, that's so important. I was in Saratoga. We do a travel show, and I was in Saratoga yesterday, and we invite as many government officials as we can get in the room, you know, the county board and the county administrator and all those people. And if we can get them there, that's good, because even they'll come up to us after the argument and say, I'm so glad to see and they're a little surprised. They're surprised to see the professionalism with which we approach the cases. And I want to tell you all, they shouldn't be surprised. We are not surprised, are we, that we can approach challenging issues with a professional, legal, balanced, analytical method? That's what we do. And that's what the courts are about. But it's a really important message. And carrying that message in our civics education is something that I know our chief judge, our current chief, is really encouraging. And I've been thoughtful about how we can continue that. And so I've just given you a little speech because I'm doing it right here now. So I hope you hear me. And thank you.
And Hector, do you feel a political divide in your court? Is there a political
you know,
divide?
Chief, I don't know. I haven't experienced much politics in the court. You know, I mean, me? You're kidding, right? No, all kidding aside. We are we have one Republican, so we are pretty diverse in that regard.
You really have one
we have
Republican
one,
on the court? Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Yeah, Mark Dillon. God bless him. But all kidding aside, I mean, the reality is, I think, and you know, Chief, you did the job. You were
Yes.
in the intermediate appellate court for many years. I think I could speak for anyone who served in any appellate court, in any trial judge, I think. There's nothing that is more offensive that you can say about a judge than to suggest that they are outcome-oriented, right? And so I dare say, I don't think I have anyone in my court who works that way. You know, we come to the cases based on the record, right? We make determinations. Do we disagree? Of course we do.
So when you have a case come up, both of you don't say to yourself, oh, this strikes the liberal-conservative divide. This one, that one, and the other one is going to be on this side, and that one is going to be on the other side. That doesn't occur to you when a case comes up?
I have never done that. They are random.
That's not what leaps to mind.
You know, they are random assignments. We hear cases in random divides. The judges of the court are rotating through, and there's some effort by the court clerk's office to keep the thickness, if you will, so that one judge doesn't get all the really big, heavy cases in one term. But beyond that, there's no, I do not manage in that way, and I think it would be inappropriate to do that.
No, similarly, things are done randomly. I mean, listen, if a judge says, I'm unavailable May 16th, please don't schedule me that day because I have a doctor's appointment, that we obviously accommodate that. But similar to
But you don't think in those terms.
Well, I mean, look, I work with people some of my colleagues for like 10 or 11 years. I know how Judge X may look at a certain labor law case, for example, right? Because I've worked with them for so long. But I don't know if that's they're coming in with a political ideal.
It's just the way
it's just,
they are
the
as a
standard
human
that their standard for X evidence, for prima facie, is at a certain place might be something different than what I'm thinking.
Not to pat the two of you on your back or the New York State courts, but isn't that the way it's supposed to be, that we take each case and we look at it on its merits without letting our individual biases or prejudices interfere the way we decide cases?
And even though what my friend and colleague just said, you do get to know how your colleagues think about certain things.
Yes, but that's
I'm an
different,
that is different, and I'm an eternal optimist, and I always think that on the next case, maybe they'll see it more the way I do. Who knows? It might happen this time. So I don't give up hope. I don't give up hope in a whole lot of circumstances, and certainly not with my smart colleagues. I always think, maybe this time I'll convince them of the rightness of my position. And we'll see. Sometimes I do.
And you know what? On the high court, I know Rowan feel the same way. We surprise each other every day at why this judge is over there and that judge is over there, because we don't think that way. We look at the individual case.
Right, but I think that's the problem, right? I mean, the problem that I can't blame lay people, right? They see a decision that makes no sense, right? And quite candidly, even before I was a judge, I probably thought, I was a lawyer, I still thought that. But it's only today, having done this job for so long, and I realize when I talk to people, they look like they have three heads. But I'm very loath to criticize other appellate courts because I didn't read the record, right?
Of course.
Was the issue preserved? What did the judges have in front of them?
Right.
The public just hears what the decision is,
They
and they
haven't
decide
read the
where they are.
papers, yeah.
That's right. And I think that's what's a concern. That's where civic education is so
But let
important.
me ask the two of you. Yes, civic education is so important in that regard. But let me ask you another question. Today, nationally at least, there's so much criticism of judicial decisions, in one direction or another. How do the two of you feel in the second and third department when your judicial decisions, I don't mean necessarily yours, but the courts, or it could be yours that you wrote it, gets harshly criticized in the papers or in an editorial or out in the public domain? Do you resent that, or do you feel like that's part of what it means to be a judge?
Look, is there anybody talking to me, right, Chief? You sat with me for 5 hours, right? Remember that? All kidding aside, though, look, it's part of what we do, right, Chief? And it's just part of the business. And I just think when you're a judge, right? I was mentioning, is Ms. Corman here? I was saying to her earlier, there she is. You don't get into I've learned a long time ago, all right? Judges don't get credit for anything. We just get blamed for things. Because if you make a decision the lawyer agrees with, it was his or her brilliance that won the day.
Yes, of course.
If you make a decision they don't agree with, I'm an idiot. So I've learned long ago, no one roots for the umpire, so I'm not particularly concerned about that. You just get used to it. It comes with the territory, and we take these jobs understanding that, right? We serve in that way, and you just eat it. And listen, and I do separate, at least for me, I separate someone taking a decision and using it, a political leader using it for political purposes. I know what they're doing, and I don't lose sleep over that.
Beth, feel the same way?
Tone is everything, and there's legitimate criticism, and then there's other stuff, and it just, what are we going to do about it? So, yeah, it doesn't bother me over much. Disparaging our institutions on the whole bothers me deeply.
Or disparaging the integrity of a judge.
Individual judges, that's really a problem. That is a huge problem. I know people are really trying to contend with that, because the danger of that is the undermining of the entire institution. So that's different than criticizing, oh, look, they got that decision wrong. When it's personal and targeted in some way, that's truly deeply dangerous, and I think we probably all acknowledge that.
What do you think of the... What do you think of the role of intermediate appellate courts in general? There are some states in the country, and really it surprised me when I went, as the chief does, to these national meetings, that there are a lot of states that the appeals go straight from the trial courts to the high court. What's the role of the intermediate appellate court? Is it important? Of course, in a big state like New York, you'd expect it. But what do you think philosophically of that role of having an intermediate appellate court?
Well, I think our particular system in New York, I think it's fantastic. Honestly, I do. No, and I think it was really genius, right? Especially our appellate divisions have certain fact-finding abilities, right? That we can do. We can search the
Different
record.
roles, right?
That's correct. And then the court that you had for so many years, Chief, it's a court of law, right? That makes legal determinations, and that was done for a reason, so that no one, even amongst ourselves in the courts, no one court had omnipotent power, right? It was really, in my opinion, quite brilliant. So I don't know how these other states work, Chief, so it's tough to answer what they do. I think our system works very well.
I agree with the brilliant design. I 110%. There's something else. The intermediate courts serve an essential function of error correction, which is not the role of the highest court, and that is also reflected in that as P.J. LaSalle alluded to, the fact-finding power, the broader power that we have to do things in the interests of jurisdiction, all go hand in hand with that. So we are correcting where there was something that went astray, and sometimes we can opine on what that big overarching rule is, but that's not our primary function most of the time.
How do you feel when your cases go up to the High Court, to the Court of Appeals? Is that something you welcome, and how closely do you follow what comes out of the Court of Appeals, what it came out of your department, and what did you all decide, and what did they decide? Is that a good thing when your cases go up?
We necessarily follow what the highest court says, and let me make that clear to
Did
my
you hear that,
colleagues
Chief?
from that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
We watch and then we apply as best we can in all cases. I wish that I had more time in my day to watch all those arguments, because I do track our cases. I watch them, I reread, when I see that they're coming up on the court sends out those nice summaries, and I read them and I reread our case, and I think, oh, I'm gonna watch arguments that day. But the truth of the matter is, I work a lot, and I don't get to watch as many of those arguments as I wish I could. But then I do follow when the cases come down. I congratulate my judges when they have prevailed, and I console when they have not, and I do that. So it's a good process. But the brilliance of design.
Hector, you spend all day watching the Court of Appeals arguments.
I don't watch, but I do. No, okay, I do read everything, Chief, that comes out from all four departments. Whatever comes out of the Court of Appeals, I read it. I read it all. Now, admittedly, Chief, don't get mad. Sometimes some of those dissents are very long, and I save those for the summer. but I do get to them. And I do read the footnotes. I read them all. But all kidding aside, no, I think it would be malpractice, all kidding aside, for the presiding justice of any of the 4 departments not to be reading everything that comes out of that court. It's essential. Right?
Do you follow? I think Beth just mentioned it. Were you aware when in your department there was a different decision than in one of the other departments and they were in conflict? We know that's one of the reasons why a case might go up to the high court. Mm-hmm. Are you aware of that when you know this is in conflict for what they're doing in a different department or what they've opined?
Well, obviously, when something goes, I'm always interested in trying to figure out why, right? Why it was taken, and that's something that I feel strongly about. And I applaud the Court of Appeals every time they take a case where there's a split in the departments, because I just think that's an essential role. It helps streamline things, right? And I think it makes it easier for the public and for the bar. And so, yes, I'm always applauding that. But to the initial point, I'm happy when they take any case they take. Because at the end, all kidding aside, the idea is to get it right, right?
Let the law be clear.
Let the law be clear so that we know what we're doing. Because oftentimes we have our own dissents within, especially a court as big as mine. You know, I have 26 judges, right? So, and they have different views on things. So, if the Court of Appeals can clear it up, it helps us. So every time they make a decision on something, it's always helpful. It's never a bad thing.
If we've done our job right, we have actually reported in our case that here's the split, and we've identified that and explained why we think this and not that. I can't think of a case name, but I can think of my 2 friends sitting here, Hector and Jerry, that where we recently said, well, here's the 2nd department said this, the 4th department said that, and then we make our call, and so we're setting that up for them, and that's part of that brilliant design.
Have either of you been vouchered into the High Court, to the Court of Appeals, and what was that experience like if you have done that?
I did. It's been some years. It was with the prior administration. I sat with Judge DiFiore. So I don't know how to better describe the experience. I will say that I really love the 3rd department. So there's that. But it was fun. I am making a joke. Forgive me for taking liberties, but yeah. So.
Hector?
Yeah, I had the opportunity. It was a lot of fun. They were wonderful. The judges were wonderful, very hospitable. It was very interesting to see how they do things. It was great.
Yeah, but as someone who's done both roles, your role and been on the High Court, it is a different experience, right?
Yes.
All joking aside, now a good number of my judges have had that privilege and honor, and they all feel really excited by the opportunity.
Yeah.
They come back with new and different information, new and different perspectives. It is a different court. It has a different purpose and a different approach, and so each of my judges who have had that opportunity have come back with both some joy and satisfaction from the process.
Let me ask you just a couple of more questions, because we're just about out of time, and people want the dessert, So, quick, personally, each of you, if you feel free to talk about, what has been your most challenging case or cases that you've had to deal with, being on the Appellate Division or being as the PJ? Can you identify what was the most either exciting, challenging, interesting, difficult?
Well, from a case perspective, I won't name a specific case, but the most difficult cases for me are the family court cases, right? You see a case, and we expedite those, so we see them pretty quickly, but something can change in a child's life in 90 days, 6 months, and you have this record. And I can't tell you, Chief, I think I could speak for any judge who's handled these types of cases. Those are the ones, at least I lose sleep over, right? Because you're dealing with someone's life, you're dealing with this child's life, and you feel very helpless from an appellate judge's role because of the coldness of the record. So those are the cases that give me the most difficult time, personally. And then I can say the most difficult thing I've had to do is being PJ, was when we had to let go of 47 people for not complying with the COVID rules that we had in place.
Yes, well,
And
it's a
I
difficult
thought-
period.
Yeah, I think signing those letters to this day, a lot of people, a lot of people not making very much money, $60,000, $70,000 a year, trying to feed their families, and because of whatever their feelings were about the injection, lost their jobs. And I think, without saying what I thought about the policy, that human element
Yes.
remains the most difficult thing I've had to do in all my years as a judge.
Beth?
Yeah, on the whole, the sort of fun and most enjoyable cases are those government and business cases, whether it's contract or torts or whatever. And on the whole, the pain of family cases and criminal cases can be so intense, and we have such a so we hear all the appeals for 28 counties, and so the number of awful things that have to come through in any given term it can really be significant. And so I'm glad for the mix of cases at all times, because the gravity of what we are trying to address, and sometimes so imperfectly, is can otherwise really weigh on one. But that people are out there trying to do good things and trying to make a difference, and that's always evident. But the rawness of some of it can be very challenging.
Let me switch gears for one last question, and then dessert, everybody. We're here tonight with the Historical Society. Why is it that we do what we do? Why is it important that we preserve the legal history of our state? Why do you need an Historical Society of the courts of the state of New York? What's the meaning of it all? Why is that something critically important?
Because if we don't tell our story, nobody will. And this is, any part of history is important. You know that I love the Historical Society. I love the work it does. I love the programs. I love the calendars. The whole thing. But if we don't tell our stories, it will not be preserved. And things change so quickly. And if we don't pass this forward, even when Judge Renwick was sitting up here and telling the story about making that change, and telling the story of Constance Baker Motley, these things, we've got to tell these stories, and that's what I think is such important work for this group.
I couldn't agree more. I think, and we have so much to be proud of in New York, right? And then you think about, for example, I'll give you a perfect example. When I read Mark, a little plug for Mark here, Judge Dillon's book, and you had him here as part of the Historical Society talk about the legacy of John Jay. You learn so much, and it's right here in New York, right? Or whether it's Cardozo, whether it's Palsgraf versus LIRR, all these great things that we did here in New York, we did it first. And it's important that, again, that legacy be maintained, be celebrated, and I think it's just wonderful, and certainly something that we as judges, I think, learn from. I hope the public learns from it. No, the society does a wonderful job. I'm honored to be here tonight and to be part of this in a small way.
Thank you. But we've had such a storied history. We've had such a storied history of the law in New York. I want to thank the two of you for being a part of it, and all of you for being a part of it. Thank you so much.